April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The oxygen mask did little to conceal Oberleutnant Ralph Hermehein's self-satisfied grin as he observed the ungainly shapes ascending laboriously toward his formation through the perfectly transparent sky of his Focke-Wulf 190A5. The seasoned ace from Jagdgeschwader 26 at 26 years of age meticulously studied the American aircraft making their maiden combat sortie over occupied Europe. "My armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, barely containing his amusement at the sight of the colossal Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling to gain altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in a compact formation, their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines straining against their 7-ton mass. To German pilots accustomed to the graceful Spitfires and agile Soviet fighters, these stout American machines appeared almost ludicrous. Bulbous fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed disproportionately small for their immense bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's arsenal. What Hermeken failed to grasp, what none of the German pilots circling like predatory wolves above could have possibly conceived, was that they were witnessing the genesis of the instrument that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would evolve from objects of mockery into harbingers of dread, their .850 caliber Browning machine guns becoming the most terrifying sound in German skies. The mechanics of annihilation were already embedded within those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to tear a Messerschmitt in half in under 2 seconds. The transformation commenced that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation maneuvering for an assault. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had transitioned from RAF Spitfires mere weeks prior, understood what his men had yet to realize. Survival in the P-47 necessitated abandoning every preconceived notion of aerial combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design principles. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had engineered something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that leveraged mass, power, and overwhelming firepower to redefine the very essence of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots dispersed across the French sky that morning were individuals destined for legendary status, future aces whose names would sow terror in the hearts of the Luftwaffe. Yet, on April 8, 1943, they were novices in an unproven airframe, confronting the most experienced fighter force globally. The Germans had been engaged in continuous combat since 1939, boasting veterans from Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, conversely, had logged precisely 0 days in combat. This is the chronicle of how industrial might triumphed over tactical finesse, how quantity and quality coalesced into insurmountable superiority, and how German pilots' laughter transmuted into abject terror as they discovered the devastating impact of synchronized Browning machine guns on an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They desired a high-altitude interceptor capable of challenging the Luftwaffe's finest. What Kartveli conceived instead was a leviathan that redefined the boundaries of possibility. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli declared to his design team, "but it will be a dinosaur with impeccable proportions." The XP-47B prototype, which first took to the air on May 6, 1941, astonished all who beheld it. At 9,900 pounds empty weight, it surpassed its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer, by 65%. The formidable turbo-supercharger system, with its intricate ductwork extending through the aft fuselage, gave it an almost portly appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably posed the same question. Does this thing actually fly? Not only did it fly, but it performed at altitude in a manner unmatched by any contemporary aircraft. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, maintained full power at 27,000 feet, a domain where German fighters struggled for breath. The turbo supercharger, fed by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where the air was too thin for conventional superchargers. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group undergoing training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially harbored a deep disdain for the aircraft. His unit had suffered the loss of 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training mishaps between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 had claimed more American lives during training than the Germans would in the initial months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled on takeoff, and dove with such ferocity that pilots encountered compressibility, their controls locking as shock waves formed on the wings. However, those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would ascend to become one of America's leading aces with 27 victories, described his inaugural flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The initial combat engagements in April and May 1943 served to solidify every German prejudice. The P-47s could not outturn the Focke-Wulf 190s, could not outclimb the Messerschmitt 19s, and could not match their agile handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots rapidly devised tactics to exploit these deficiencies, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts faltered, and forcing turning engagements where agility superseded firepower. Hauptmann Josef Pips Priller, commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, reported to headquarters after his first encounter, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them flying pigs, fat targets pretending to be warriors." The statistics appeared to corroborate German confidence. In their inaugural month of operations, the American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for a mere 3 confirmed German kills. The Royal Air Force, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, subtly advised the Americans to reconsider their aircraft selection. British pilots jested that the optimal evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the spacious cockpit. Yet, a subtle yet significant phenomenon was unfolding in those early encounters, one that German intelligence inexplicably overlooked. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before succumbing. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission bearing 21 cannon impacts and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have rendered a Messerschmitt or Spitfire to shattered fragments. The massive radial engine, devoid of vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have instantly incapacitated a liquid-cooled fighter. More critically, when P-47s managed to bring their guns to bear, the results were nothing short of catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's armament array created a convergence zone of devastation previously unknown to German pilots. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of earlier warfighters, or the cannon with their limited ammunition, the American fighter could sustain continuous fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. The pivotal event that began to alter German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Laon, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron and an encounter that would attain legendary status on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2 Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Willi Galland, the younger brother of the renowned Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a flawless attack, diving from the sun with a decisive speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers, sustaining catastrophic damage within the opening seconds of the engagement. 20mm cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was torn away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, attempted to bail out, only to discover the canopy was jammed. A 20mm shell had detonated within the canopy track, welding it shut. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What transpired next defied all assumptions regarding combat damage. Tolerance, despite lacking forward visibility through the oil-streaked windscreen. A barely functional engine that vibrated violently, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and orient it toward England. The P-47 continued its flight, bearing damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then, the situation worsened. A lone Focke-Wulf 190, piloted by an unidentified German pilot from 2GG-26, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the English Channel at less than 170 miles per hour. Historical research has never definitively identified this pilot, though several names have been proposed based on German combat reports from that day. What followed was one of the most extraordinary encounters in the annals of aerial warfare. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entirety of the cannon ammunition load. The German then repositioned and fired again, this time employing only his machine guns. With his cannon ammunition expended, the German pilot pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could clearly discern his face. Young, fair-haired, his expression morphing from confidence to bewilderment to something akin to apprehension. The German pilot then repositioned and emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flew. He pulled alongside once more, shook his head in apparent amazement, offered a cursory salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 made a harrowing landing at Manston, its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief ceased counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had detonated mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had sustained direct hits. The control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through, yet the aircraft had brought him home. The miraculous survival of Johnson's aircraft sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers examining the wreckage realized they had profoundly underestimated their creation. German intelligence, upon receiving combat reports from the second flight of Jagdgeschwader 26, initially refused to accept them. No aircraft, they reasoned, could absorb such a degree of punishment. However, testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had endured everything the Luftwaffe's premier fighter could deliver and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were beginning to master the exploitation of the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the commander of the 56th Fighter Group, had unearthed the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them, don't climb with them at low altitude, use your weight, use your power, use your guns. The Thunderbolt's immense weight, initially perceived as a liability, was transformed into a formidable weapon. In a dive, nothing could match its speed. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, exceeding the velocity of any German fighter, even in a vertical plummet. This velocity could be converted into altitude through a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who would become one of the first American aces in Europe, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots affectionately referred to it as the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would ascend to 30,000 feet, a domain beyond the effective operational ceiling of most German fighters. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, achieving speeds that rendered deflection shooting an impossibility for the defending Germans. At the apex of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would unleash their fury. German pilots who survived these encounters described it as confronting a veritable wall of lead. The combined firepower created an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught within this convergence pattern did not merely fall, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower manifested during the August 17, 1943, dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. This mission would exemplify both the P-47's limitations, particularly its range even with drop tanks, and its terrifying efficacy when employed with precision. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft preparing to engage the B-17s with their potent heavy cannon and rocket armament. These twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less maneuverable, represented the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner aboard one of the Me-110s who survived, later recounted in a POW interrogation. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 110s were annihilated in under a minute. The German pilots had never before experienced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At the convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected within a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything caught within that zone faced 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a testament to American industrial might. While German fighters grappled with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could sustain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load comprised a mix of armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition, arranged in patterns designed for both destruction and ignition. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronting another grim reality regarding the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. German fighters relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers experienced significant performance degradation above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, met his end under these circumstances on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremond, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190 A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the rarefied air. The BMW 801 engine, potent at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were utterly defenseless. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his trajectory to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Phillips' distinctive Fokker-Wulf with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30 degrees deflection, observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded, no parachute observed. Phillips' demise sent tremors through the Luftwaffe. If one of their most accomplished pilots, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both the Eastern and Western fronts, could not prevail against the Thunderbolts, what hope did average pilots possess? The German High Command ordered an immediate inquiry into the P-47's capabilities. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could attain. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor protection included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates surrounding the engine. Most disturbingly, its robust construction allowed it to absorb damage that would obliterate 3 conventional fighters and still return to base. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England, one that would finalize its transformation from a laughingstock to a nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller with paddle blades 13 feet in diameter, boasting broad chord blades that bit into the air like massive scythes. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and pronounced. Where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The colossal propeller also enhanced acceleration, enabling P-47s to build energy more rapidly in level flight. Hauptmann Heinz Knock of Jagdgeschwader 1, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He recorded in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than enhance performance. It altered the very sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar, generated by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds, could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, ominous rumble that signaled impending death from above. They began to call it Donnerschlag, meaning thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried either 2 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their range to over 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller providing improved performance even under load, Thunderbolts could engage on equal terms immediately after jettisoning their tanks. The Luftwaffe's response was to concentrate its efforts on the bombers, hoping to inflict sufficient losses to halt the American daylight offensive. However, this necessitated penetrating the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal undertaking. German pilots developed a grudging respect, bordering on outright fear, for the formidable American fighters. Major Erich Hartmann, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, predominantly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him severely wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Plunging into that torrent meant certain demise. The convoy protection sorties highlighted another significant advantage of the P-47. its operational endurance. While German fighter engines were pushed to their limits, guzzling fuel at a prodigious rate, the robust American radial engines maintained efficient operation at high altitudes. This allowed Thunderbolts to shadow bomber formations for extended periods, seamlessly rotating air cover duties while retaining ample fuel reserves for both engagement and the return journey. As a greater influx of P-51 Mustangs began assuming long-range escort responsibilities in the spring of 1944, Thunderbolt squadrons increasingly redirected their focus to ground assault operations, a role that would ultimately elevate them to the most dreaded aircraft within the German Air Force's inventory. This strategic shift gained significant momentum in April of 1944, coinciding with the Allied preparations for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's formidable battery of heavy machine guns proved equally devastating against ground targets. Its standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition possessed the capability to penetrate the upper armor plating of most German armored vehicles, while the sheer volume of suppressive fire could obliterate lightly armored targets in mere seconds. A 2-second burst delivered 160 half-inch projectiles into an area the size of a truck. However, it was the integration of bombs and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a versatile, multi-role aerial weapon. The D-25 variant was capable of carrying 2 1,000-pound bombs beneath its wings and a 500-pound bomb under its fuselage, a bomb load comparable to that of early war medium bombers. Subsequent variants incorporated zero-length rocket rails, enabling the carriage of 8 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each possessing the explosive potential of a 105mm artillery shell. During the Normandy campaign, Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, experienced the P-47's ground attack capabilities firsthand. They descended at extremely low altitudes, so low one could discern the pilot's features. The auditory impact was terrifying. Engines snarled, rockets shrieked. Then came the relentless hammer of those heavy machine guns. A convoy of our trucks simply vanished. 20 vehicles were reduced to burning wreckage in a single pass. The psychological toll on the soldiers was catastrophic. They dubbed them Jabos, fighter bombers. But these were something beyond that. They were aerial artillery possessing the precision of marksmen. On the 6th of June 1944, the Luftwaffe was forced to confront the complete reversal of aerial superiority. Over 500 P-47s provided an impenetrable aerial shield for the invasion, creating a formidable umbrella over the landing zones. German fighter aircraft attempting to penetrate these defenses were decimated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky was unequivocally American. Thunderbolts were positioned from sea level to 30,000 feet. We attempted to break through at dawn. 12 fighters from our group. I was the sole survivor. The P-47s were omnipresent at every altitude. One could neither climb above them nor dive beneath them. Their weaponry reduced our fighters to raining aluminum." In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s systematically disrupted German logistical movements during daylight hours. The statistical data is staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed the destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. The Wehrmacht was compelled to restrict its movements to nighttime operations, severely impeding its capacity to react to Allied offensives. The Germans employed every conceivable measure to counter the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced vehicle armor, deployed additional anti-aircraft batteries, and developed novel camouflage techniques. None proved effective. The P-47's unparalleled combination of speed, structural integrity, and offensive firepower rendered it nearly invincible. Even the formidable 88mm anti-aircraft guns struggled to maintain tracking lock on the high-speed fighters operating at low altitudes. While wreaking havoc across Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously demonstrating its exceptional effectiveness in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's inherent characteristics were ideally suited to the vast distances and challenging environmental conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, devised operational strategies tailored specifically for the Pacific Theater. On the 11th of October, 1943, Kirby led a flight of 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, personally achieving the destruction of 6 enemy planes during a single sortie, an act that subsequently earned him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging agile yet fragile American fighters, were wholly unprepared for the P-47's formidable synthesis of offensive power and resilience. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later recounted, "We referred to them as monsters. Our 20mm cannons, capable of downing a P-40 with a few direct hits, appeared to have no discernible impact. I unleashed dozens of rounds into a single Thunderbolt and observed it continue its flight. Their retaliatory fire was terrifying, streams of heavy projectiles that tore aircraft asunder." The P-47N variant, developed explicitly for Pacific operations, featured enhanced fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending its operational range to 2,350 miles. This variant would go on to escort B-29 bombers to Japan, unequivocally demonstrating that the short-range fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range aerial weapon. Perhaps the ultimate validation of the P-47's evolutionary triumph came in its engagements with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its astonishing top speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been beyond the reach of propeller-driven aircraft. However, Thunderbolt pilots discovered opportunities to intercept these jets in 2 specific scenarios: during takeoff and landing, when the jets were most vulnerable, and during high-speed dives from significant altitudes. On the 27th of November, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the inaugural pilots to achieve the destruction of a Me-262 utilizing a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt attained speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, sufficient velocity to overtake the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, overconfident in his speed advantage, failed to detect the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns unleashed their fury at a range of 400 yards. Meyer's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Substantial fragments, including both engines, detached from the fuselage. The pilot did not survive. The concentrated barrage from 850 caliber guns proved more effective than we had anticipated against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed with the specific objective of countering German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting engine output to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could achieve speeds of 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under specific conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47s, successfully downed 2 Me-262s in March of 1945. His tactical report underscored the overwhelming significance of firepower over speed. The jets possess superior speed, but they lack maneuverability and cannot withstand punishment. One well-aimed burst from our batteries, and they disintegrate as if constructed from paper. They are compelled to reduce speed to attack bombers. That is precisely when we engage them. The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might unfolded during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate last-ditch effort to cripple Allied air power on the 1st of January, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their most experienced pilots, launched surprise assaults on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, the operational base for the 36th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially achieved considerable success. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought before the command post, pointed to the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you make of that?" Major George Bostwick's response subsequently became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He gestured towards the flight line, where ground crews were already maneuvering damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for incoming replacements. "By tomorrow, we will have 40 new aircraft. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk vanished. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47 D-40s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe sustained losses of 271 aircraft and 213 pilots during Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. These were losses Germany could never recoup. The Americans lost a total of 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, all of which were replaced within a week. The statistical disparity vividly illustrated the inevitability of defeat. Republic Aviation manufactured 15,683 P-47s during the war, exceeding the production numbers of any other American fighter aircraft. At the peak of its production capacity, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island churned out one Thunderbolt every hour, operating around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, established on previously undeveloped farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D necessitated 65,000 individual components, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone comprised 2,400 separate components, meticulously machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Yet, American workers, a significant proportion of whom were women who had never previously encountered an aircraft before the attack on Pearl Harbor, assembled these intricate machines with a precision that surpassed peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie demanded 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, with hundreds of Thunderbolts undertaking daily combat missions. By mid-1944, monthly ammunition consumption surpassed 10 million rounds. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition production facilities, manufactured 30 million rounds per month. Each cartridge was produced to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring flawless feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was immense. Each Thunderbolt consumed 100 gallons per hour during normal flight, escalating to up to 300 gallons per hour during combat operations when water injection was engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. All of this fuel was transported across the Atlantic in tankers, themselves products of American mass production capabilities. Even more remarkable than the aircraft production figures was the scale of pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training programs, a number exceeding the total number of pilots Germany had trained throughout the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight instruction before entering combat, which included 100 hours specifically in advanced fighter aircraft. In stark contrast, German pilots were entering combat with less than 100 hours of total flight time by the war's conclusion. This disparity in training quality was evident in combat performance. American pilots arrived in Europe thoroughly trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, aerial gunnery, and combat tactics. They had engaged in practice sorties against captured German aircraft, gaining an intimate understanding of their enemy's capabilities and limitations. They possessed an in-depth knowledge of their aircraft systems, having meticulously studied technical manuals that German pilots never received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September of 1944, exemplified the superior American training advantage. "I had 420 hours logged in my flight book, including 75 hours specifically in the P-47. I had practiced firing at towed targets, perfected deflection shooting, and studied gun camera footage from actual combat engagements. On my very first mission, I knew precisely what actions to take. The German pilot I encountered could not possibly have possessed half my experience. It wasn't even a fair contest. In March of 1945, Oberstleutnant Josef Priller, the same pilot who had derisively referred to the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years prior, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to bolster wartime morale. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for public release, revealed the complete metamorphosis in German perception. The Thunderbolt is unequivocally the finest fighter-bomber ever constructed. Its firepower is unprecedented. Its weaponry never jams, never overheats, and never runs out of ammunition during standard combat operations. It carries bombs with the capacity of a medium bomber, launches rockets with the force of artillery, and engages in fighter-to-fighter combat when necessary. But beyond the machine itself lies the essence of what it represents. Unlimited American production. They lose 10 aircraft, and they build 20. We lose 1, and it is gone forever. Their pilots arrive with superior training to our instructors. They possess ample fuel for training, abundant ammunition for practice, and spare parts for every contingency. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is merely postponed defeat. We ridiculed them in 1943. We are not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has arrived. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it signifies overwhelming material superiority. They did not defeat us through superior tactics or more courageous pilots. They buried us beneath an avalanche of steel and lead. By April of 1945, the Luftwaffe effectively existed only on paper. Fuel shortages had grounded the majority of its aircraft. Experienced pilots were either deceased or captured. Airfields lay in ruins, pockmarked by bomb craters. Even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an insurmountable challenge. Engaging meant confronting P-47 formations that dominated every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettschneider, one of the last German pilots to undergo training in 1945, flew precisely one combat mission before the war concluded. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted a mere 12 seconds. I observed them descending from above, 4 Thunderbolts flying in perfect formation. I attempted to evade, but they were too swift. The lead aircraft opened fire from 500 meters. My aircraft bucked violently, as if struck by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wing detached. I barely managed to escape. While descending by parachute, I witnessed them annihilate my entire staff. 6 fighters destroyed in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and human remains. The psychological impact was absolute. German pilots developed what medical personnel termed Jabo fever, manifesting as physical symptoms of extreme stress upon reports of Thunderbolt presence in the vicinity. Veterans who had engaged Spitfires and Hurricanes without apprehension experienced debilitating illness prior to missions involving P-47s. The distinctive thrumming of approaching Thunderbolts instilled panic among ground troops, who understood that immediate cover was paramount for survival. The final operational statistics for the P-47 defy comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 86,000 railway cars destroyed. 9,000 locomotives destroyed. 6,000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed. 68,000 trucks destroyed. 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 1,500 vehicles destroyed. 150 locomotives destroyed. Countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, executed 213,873 combat sorties, deployed 120,000 tons of ordnance, discharged 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. Thunderbolt units achieved an aerial combat kill ratio of 4.6 to 1 while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Beneath these statistics lay the profound human cost. The Luftwaffe sustained approximately 28,000 pilot fatalities in combat against Western Allied forces. Many succumbed to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of invaluable training that Germany could never replace. By the war's end, the average German fighter pilot possessed less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had accumulated over 200 hours. At the Luftwaffe interrogation center in Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence. Records recovered in 1945 revealed German assessments of Allied aircraft. The file pertaining to the P-47, continuously updated throughout the war, documented a complete reversal of initial opinions. April 1943. A large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment: minimal threat. December 1943. Exceptional high-altitude performance, extreme structural integrity. Firepower increasingly problematic. Pilots exhibiting improved tactical proficiency. Assessment: significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber. Superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Firepower devastating against all target categories. Structural robustness makes destruction exceedingly difficult. Assessment: critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945. The premier fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance is unparalleled. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment: unsurvivable in direct engagement. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots held in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in a spirit of peace. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was questioned about the P-47. His response, recorded on video, captured the complete transformation in perspective. "We made a grave miscalculation in 1943. We observed this large, heavy fighter and scoffed. We believed the Americans did not comprehend aerial combat. We declared they had constructed a bomber and labeled it a fighter. It was we who failed to understand. The Americans did not endeavor to build a European-style fighter. They engineered an American one, conceived with production, firepower, and survivability as its core tenets. They grasped that in a war of attrition, the aircraft capable of absorbing punishment while delivering devastating firepower would ultimately prevail. They were correct. The initial time I piloted a captured P-47 after the war, I comprehended everything. The power was extraordinary. It ascended as if falling upwards. The cockpit was remarkably comfortable. The visibility was excellent, the controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft enveloped in armor. But what truly impressed me was the realization that America manufactured over 15,000 of these complex machines while simultaneously engaged in a two-ocean conflict. Each required an engine more intricate than anything Germany produced. Yet they produced them at a faster rate than we could manufacture simple fighters. That was the moment I understood we never stood a chance. Those guns, we nicknamed them Roosevelt's piano, due to the distinctive sound they produced. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my comrades heard it for the final time. The P-47 did not merely defeat the Luftwaffe, it annihilated it. The P-47's design perfectly embodied the American industrial philosophy, brute force engineering underpinned by inexhaustible resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars possessed the structural integrity to support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount was engineered to withstand 12 G-forces. The control cables were systematically doubled, incorporating automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel of engineering. 8 independent ammunition boxes, each containing 425 rounds, were fed by electric boost motors to prevent jamming during aggressive maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to preclude freezing at high altitudes. Each gun featured its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. The convergence point was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, enabling pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 triumphed through sheer quantity, not quality, asserting that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numerical superiority. The combat records, however, present a different narrative. In engagements where the number of aircraft on both sides was equal, P-47s consistently emerged victorious. The heavy machine gun armament, initially dismissed as inferior to cannons, proved more effective in actual combat scenarios. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed the reason. While cannon shells, individually more destructive, demanded precise aim and possessed limited ammunition capacity, typically 120 to 200 rounds in total. The P-47's weaponry generated a probability cone of bullets that ensured hits even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst unleashed at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, sufficient to guarantee destruction. The ammunition itself was demonstrably superior. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds utilized a delayed action fuse, ensuring deep penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, generating sufficient heat to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, while heavier, frequently detonated upon superficial contact, causing spectacular but often non-critical damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston-powered fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds surpassed the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine generated more power than entire bomber formations from the preceding war. Its weapons array delivered more concentrated firepower than an infantry squad. Yet, it was manufactured by the thousands, piloted by individuals barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who acquired their expertise in mere weeks. The transformation of German sentiment from derision to abject terror transpired in less than 2 years. During that period, the formidable flying machine, often dubbed the milk bottle by adversaries, emerged as the most dreaded aerial weapon in the Luftwaffe's history. Seasoned aviators who had bravely confronted Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without a tremor would recount encounters with the P-47 Thunderbolt in hushed, reverent tones, even decades after the cessation of hostilities. At the esteemed United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a meticulously restored P-47D is proudly displayed alongside other iconic combat aircraft. While its descriptive plaque details technical attributes and commendations earned in battle, the true essence of its prowess is conveyed through a modest display case. Within it rests a collection of expended .50 caliber shell casings and a reel of gun camera footage, vividly capturing a Focke-Wulf 190 being torn apart under a hail of American ordnance. Beneath this exhibit, a poignant statement from an anonymous German airman, extracted from a 1945 interrogation transcript, speaks volumes. "We initially found them amusing, those bulky, ungainly American planes that lacked maneuverability. We ceased our mirth when we understood their operational doctrine. They required no complex aerial acrobatics. They simply aimed their formidable weaponry, and existence for the target evaporated. Our laughter vanished along with our fallen comrades." The P-47 Thunderbolt commenced its operational service as an object of scorn and concluded the conflict as an instrument of utter destruction. In the intervening years, its 8 synchronized Browning machine guns fundamentally altered the paradigms of air combat, effectively overwhelming the Luftwaffe beneath a relentless deluge of ammunition. German pilots had initially derided the awkward-looking American fighter in April of 1943. By May of 1945, there remained no German pilots alive to partake in such mockery. The Thunder had irrevocably declared its dominance, and the skies were now firmly under American dominion.